Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our brand new study in Rudolf Otto and his book Naturalism and Religion, dated 1907. This work comes 22 years prior to his most famous work of The Idea of the Holy. So, if you refer back to that composite that we did for The Idea of the Holy, this study will give us the groundwork of how he attained to that theology. It'll give us the foundation and the building blocks to where he reached his theology and the idea of the holy. We're going to take a look at pages 1 to 34. We're going to take a look at just some introductory comments. And we're going to begin in block 1 and take a look at the religious interpretation of the world. Otto tells us that the naturalistic or religious interpretations of the world stand in antithesis to each other. We must reconcile this antithesis. Harmony does exist as a possibility. But he says we must distinguish between the myth in the religious narrative and what is true spiritual content in religious narrative. And he says we must negate any old apologetic approach. Now, under speculative development, currently religion has a fixed framework of convictions or a worldview theory. Religious theory must be harmonized with natural science, the theories of metaphysics. What he says is that we have to validate our religious positings through speculative development. But he says there is a minimal requirement. Religious theory consists of a network of convictions. We need to ask if natural science exists with a minimal requirement of at least some religious point of view. Natural science unites itself with other distinctive convictions. It forms a world interpretation of its own. And this is what religious theory stands against. So naturalism does imply a worldview of its own. So we want to take a look at the religious outlook. Religious theory must be demonstrated, says Otto, as regarding human existence. Metaphysical reflection will supplement this demonstration. We do not reason from the finite to the infinite out of a logical necessity. Instead, religion arises from the depth of human spirit. In other words, we know it's going to be phenomenology. We know that ahead of time. So under this depth of human spirit, out of the depth of human spirit, the religious view then confronts general knowledge. The idea of providence cannot be directly derived from nature or from history. We simply point to indications in history that justify our interpretation in terms of the religious ultimate purpose. We must be awakened to reflect on our ideas, to reflect and to demonstrate our ideas. We must be awakened to reflection in note 6. Religion lives by certainty of ideas, which are the convictions of religion. They are regarded as aletheia true. Religion, therefore, is a self-critical discipline in its desire to express and posit the real. So we take a look at Block 1, Note 7, to express and posit the real. Religious expression of the real differs from secular expression in form and in method and in tone. Certainty is attained in the believing mind, which transcends sensate apprehension. Religious consciousness is a truth of a different kind with the character of an ideal truth. So it is a truth of another kind. It is a reality that needs to become concrete in actuality. So if we're looking at this theory of religious interpretation in Block 1, let's take a look at religious theory as concrete in Block 2. And Otto tells us that certain propositions become real through conscious consent and the exaltation of human spirit. And by the way, if you remember from the idea of the holy, that exaltation of human spirit, that's going to be numinous consciousness, by the way. We know that from our previous study. But in this book, he calls it exaltation of human spirit. Eidos ideas are woven together out of our inward experience and subjective impressions. The value of ideas are judged by the feeling intellect through spontaneous recognition. Again, it is that feeling intellect. Then we look at the availability for positing through infused mood. Only through the exaltation of human spirit can religious ideas come to life and attain religious truth. Then they become available for positing, and they do maintain enthusiasm as enduring mood of conduct that fuels the permanent elevation of spirit. In other words, it fuels the numinous consciousness. So under Block 2, Note 3, the permanent elevation of spirit, this is the praying without ceasing in the letters of Paul as Paul's permanent mood. Truth is only found in these moments of ecstasy. Interpretations of the feeling intellect must become enthusiasms. Okay, so we know from the idea of the holy, we moved into the stage of infusion. Now he calls that the stage of enthusiasm. This infusion creates the stage of enthusiasm. So the interpretations, the idea interpretations of the feeling intellect must become infused enthusiasms. Artistic expressions of spirit which will make a better figurative positing of the kingdom of God. So here's the groundwork for that moment of infusion we had when we studied the idea of the holy. Now we know where it comes from. It is an infusion transitions the ideas of feeling intellect into enthusiasms. Then we can enter into figurative positing of the kingdom of God. And that was called Rhema, if you remember in the previous study in the idea of the holy, it was called Rhema, living voice. In this book he calls it figurative positing of the kingdom of God. In Note 4, Block 2, Note 4, we seek entrance nodes for our positing of the kingdom of God. As Luther said, faith always goes against appearance. There is never an absolute congruence with the scientific worldview. Our religious theory throws light on our place, it throws light on our destiny in existence. So we need to take a look at this place and destiny in existence. We ask for the real to adapt itself to our posited interpretation, and we seek corroboration of our figurative idea model. We seek the overmastering of appearances. We seek a solution to the riddle of appearance, seeking to resolve it through faith. And that means, for Otto, the faith of positing, the faith of ministry. Okay, it's active faith, the faith of positing. Now, under the Block 2, Note 6, the theory of naturalism, naturalism is not chance phenomena. It is inevitable growth. Its historical forms resemble each other in method and in aim and in argument, always arising through a process of negation, always opposing the supernatural, always inaugurated by the impulse for understanding. So under this impulse to understand, a mode of causal connection binds all things together in naturalism as a necessity explaining all things. Through the presentiments, it is apprehended, and from this primitive naturalistic outlook, a reconstruction of nature arises of the manifold kind. But it's all going to be abbreviated under the idea of naturalism as monism. Note 8. It's an all-sufficiency of nature, absent from intervening influence, complete denial of teleology, with an aversion to purpose. All phenomena are turned back to simple processes. In other words, through a process of reduction, it reduces everything, even the organic, back to simple processes. Obviously, Otto wants to correct that false position of naturalism by bridging religious interpretation and scientific interpretation together to create that bridge. And that means, if you go to block 3, that means seeking to realize a unified interpretation of reality. We seek to realize a unified interpretation of reality. And he begins with the poet Goethe of early Ephesus. Nature was far from mechanistic. Instead, nature was related to the goddess Diana. She was in all things, in all transformations. And that's either Artemis or Diana, through an evolution of gradual stages, summed up in the statement in Job that he goes by me, but I see him not. He is transformed, but I perceive him not, which emphasizes the ineffable aspect of this incarnation, this beyond concept nature of this monism in naturalism. So under perceiving transformation, he never declared a mechanistic naturalism. For him, matter was moved from all eternity to call forth the phenomena of existence. Otto tells us there are two kinds of naturalism: the mechanistic view, where consciousness is just a reflex mechanism; the animistic view, which is pantheism, which tries to hold on to ideas of the true and the good. But Otto says these views lack definite principles, and they borrow religious concepts that are not their own, because in itself it has a poverty of ideal content. So he wants to look at the methodology of naturalism. It seeks to refer all phenomena to simple modes of occurrence, admitting nothing beyond itself, a system of causal experiences, a system of causal sequences only, according to laws reduced to formula, eliminating the incommensurable cause and the final cause. Obviously a very limited view. So, under incommensurable cause, Otto says being and becoming include two realms: nature, but also consciousness, and the process of consciousness. We must bridge the gulf between these two, and it's impossible to regard consciousness as corporeal. Nature itself is incapable of a unified interpretation on its own. So, this goal of unified interpretation in Block 3, Note 5, nature exhibits marvels of purpose and riddles of development. We cannot simply reduce these organic processes to non-living. To derive the organic from the category of a substance is an error. Therefore, the process of reduction, mechanistic reduction, is unacceptable, says Otto. Mechanistic reduction is unacceptable as theory, says Otto. So in this first introductory lesson, we began with the theoretical religious interpretation of the world in Block 1, and the goal of that religious interpretation is to express the real. And that means to express the real in a faith positing. But it does include phenomenology, because it is religious consciousness of a truth of a different kind. Now, how does that become concrete? In Block 2, we learned that it involves the work of numinous consciousness. We'll borrow that term from the previous study on the idea of the holy. And in this lesson, we learn that the numinous consciousness is called the exaltation of human spirit. So those three moments of schema, infusion, and rhema now become schema, exaltation of human spirit, and rhema. Actually, schema, enthusiasm, rhema, because he calls that the movement toward enthusiasms. The interpretations of the feeling intellect must become enthusiasms, expressions of spirit. Then the realm of positing becomes the figurative positing of the kingdom of God. I like that better than simply saying rhema, the figurative positing of the kingdom of God. That is our faith positing. And it becomes concrete when we seek what? Corroboration of our figurative model. We seek the overmastering of appearance. We seek to resolve, reconcile, the riddle of simple appearances, resolved through faith positing. And so that's what we get from block 2, the concrete side of enacting our theory. But our goal is unified interpretation of reality by bridging the religious with the scientific, and bridging the religious with a naturalism that is not a false worldview, but creating that bridge by recognizing the weaknesses in false naturalistic schemas, mechanistic schemas, that need to be overcome in our building of a bridge, with the goal of reaching unified interpretation of reality. And that means we're going to be doing phenomenology, because he says it is impossible to regard consciousness as corporeal. We're going to deal with the work of consciousness, or what he's called the process of consciousness. So yes, we do bridge to nature, but we cannot exclude the process of consciousness. And that means experience, and that means, we already knew this from our previous study on the idea of the holy, but it means that Professor Otto is going to write a phenomenology. This book is going to be a written phenomenology to create a bridge in order to reach unified interpretation. That's our introduction. That's going to wrap up pages 1 to 34. That was chapters 1 and 2. We'll pick up next time in chapter 3.